But he was very, he got quiet about the whole thing, and Bob was calling him, and we had said, come on, Ailes going to be in it, and Bob and you. And he said, yeah, but it's again a gangster thing. We've done it before. This is going to be different. But he wouldn't listen really. Martin Scorsese is hailed as one of the all-time great directors. From Taxi Driver to The Wolf of Wall Street, his films have transformed American cinema, combining grit, artistry, and unrelenting energy. Behind the camera, however, Scorsese's perfectionism and hot head too often came into conflict with those who were unable to live up to his high standards. He is a director who feeds on precision, vision, and dedication, and for those unwilling to give in to that intensity, conflict was inevitable. Though he created legendary teaming with Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio, two actors who fully bought into his manic style, not every actor earned his trust or his patience. Some were let go for being too slick, some for being too disorganized, and a few for having the temerity to question his vision on the set. As Scorsese himself once said, "Cinema is a matter of what's in the frame and what's out." For 6 actors, what was out of the frame was his seal of approval, and it cost them more than they ever imagined. The first name that is always mentioned in discussions of Scorsese's most intense artistic struggles is Mark Wahlberg. Few conflicts between actor and director have been as compelling or as ironic in the annals of his career as his spat with Wahlberg during the production of The Departed in 2006. What had started out as a reluctant partnership soon became a battle of wills, each man pulling in the opposite direction on how to get a single character to breathe and live on screen. Wahlberg, unlike most actors who would have begged for a role under Scorsese, wasn't sold from the start. He later admitted that when Scorsese first called him, ecstatic about making the film together, Wahlberg bluntly said, "I'm not doing the movie." He was unimpressed by the script and convinced he wasn't right for the part. Nevertheless, Scorsese saw something in him, something raw and genuine, the Boston grit that suited Sergeant Dignam. But the moment the cameras rolled, they battled. Wahlberg craved improvisation, to let go of his razor-sharp Boston edge. Scorsese craved restraint, never ceasing to say, "Less, less," as Wahlberg's instincts yelled for more. Their tension was palpable on set. Profanity-filled office sequences went on forever as Scorsese insisted on precision and nuance, and Wahlberg provided velocity, aggression, and brutality. The tension even carried over to personal issues. When Scorsese criticized Wahlberg for his unkempt hairdo, on which the actor refused to give in since he was also filming Invincible, Wahlberg retorted, "I don't give a fuck." But the irony of this conflict is its outcome. Wahlberg's performance as Dignam, which resulted from endless tug-of-war, garnered him his sole nomination for an Academy Award. Scorsese, who had fought to direct that performance, was left flabbergasted when Wahlberg's performance, and not DiCaprio's or Damon's, was recognized by the Academy. The wounds of their wars, however, still remained. Wahlberg never was in serious negotiations for Scorsese's subsequent films. The director even informed NYU students that occasionally actors provide people with what they want, not what the character requires, a statement many thought was directly pointed at Wahlberg. Wahlberg himself later confessed, "Marty and I were constantly in this struggle. I had problems with Marty, but he never totally burned the bridge," complimenting Scorsese as a genius and even throwing around possibilities for a Departed sequel. They maintained a professional air, but the artistic tension between them never healed. Nowadays, their altercation is remembered not as bitterness, but as a paradox, a struggle so fierce that it gave birth to Wahlberg's best work, but made the two never collaborate again. Then there was James Caan, another actor whose firecracker aura clashed with Scorsese's control frenzy. Fresh from his breakout performance as Sonny Corleone in The Godfather, Caan was among the most scorching hot actors of the early 1970s, charismatic, explosive, and real, to an extent few others could rival. Scorsese, working on Italian-American and Other New York, based tales, envisioned Caan as ideal. There was something dangerous about Jimmy, Scorsese afterward conceded, but the partnership faltered from the beginning. During rehearsals, Kahn started rewriting lines, discarding them, substituting them with his own natural improvisations. To Scorsese, this was blasphemy. Every line counted. Every silence counted. To him, improvisation needed to exist within the framework he had created, not destroy it. To Kahn, liberation meant abandoning the blueprints altogether and finding truth in the mess. The outcome was an irreconcilable chasm. Rehearsals were screaming matches. Cast members remembered pages flying, Scorsese's voice escalating, Kahn obstinate. Within a matter of weeks, the production fell apart. Publicly, Scorsese attributed it to differences of opinion. Privately, he acknowledged Kahn was impossible. They never collaborated on another project. Their conflict was not as much about ego, but about philosophy. Scorsese felt that film was the director's. Kahn felt that it was the actor's. When those energies met, neither gave way, leaving behind one of Hollywood's greatest what-ifs. What if Kahn appeared in a Scorsese movie? Instead, their explosive meeting existed only in industry rumor, recalled not for what they produced, but for what they didn't do. Then Julia Roberts arrived. By the early 1990s, Roberts was America's sweetheart, her beaming smile illuminating the screen in Pretty Woman and Steel Magnolias. When her name was circulating for The Age of Innocence in 1993, everyone assumed it was a match made in heaven. Her radiance with Scorsese's hyperattention to period detail. But from the initial meetings on, Scorsese felt something was amiss. Roberts had a modern sensibility he couldn't train out of her. Things reached a boiling point in the fitting room. When Roberts suffered in the oppressive corsets of the 19th century, she wondered why she had to rehearse in such pain. To her, it was not necessary. To Scorsese, it was necessary, the only method of fully inhabiting the physical repression of the time. Roberts would reference the experience afterwards, talking about a director who insisted upon her literally not breathing properly. Their philosophies conflicted. Roberts relied on empathy and emotional availability. Scorsese required historical accuracy, even at the cost of ease. Days later, Roberts dropped out of the project. Scorsese persisted, using Michelle Pfeiffer instead. Roberts went on to win her Oscar years later with Erin Brockovich. The two never collaborated again, their silence being more eloquent than words. Winona Ryder's experience with Scorsese was otherwise. She did appear on screen in The Age of Innocence, but the process exhausted her. Cast as Mae Welland, Ryder was radiant, otherworldly, and appeared to be perfect. But Scorsese envisaged Mae not as an innocent, but as a thinker, a subtle manipulator of the emotional core of the story. Ryder pushed back, wanting to make Mae human, to reveal her vulnerability. Scorsese required calculation masked by lace and silk. Their disagreement culminated with the engagement party scene. Production came to a standstill for hours as Scorsese insisted on overlaying innocence on top of ruthless control with Ryder. Crew members recalled tedious whispering sessions between shots, Ryder emerging red-eyed. The tension was heaviest as the film approached its conclusion, especially with the scene where Mae discovers she is pregnant. Scorsese craved subdued victory. Ryder gravitated toward vulnerability. What transpired, though, was irrefutable. Ryder received an Academy Award nomination. The wounds persisted, however. She avoided a lot of the film's publicity, and when questioned years after the fact, Scorsese frankly replied Mae needed something else entirely. Ryder alluded in interviews to directors who mistake suffering with depth, a subtle dig at her Scorsese experience. They never collaborated again. Their work created wonderful art, but broke down trust. Jim Carrey's encounter with Scorsese was shorter, but no less telling. In the late 1990s, Scorsese was preparing a Howard Hughes biopic, The Future of the Aviator. Carrey was briefly attached for a while. With his manic, explosive energy, Carrey appeared well-suited to play Hughes's idiosyncratic genius. But Scorsese insisted on control, precision, discipline. Carrey lived for chaos, improvisation, spontaneous discovery. His workshop sessions were said to dazzle initially, Carrey physically and mentally altering himself to portray various phases of Hughes's life. But Scorsese soon began to feel uneasy. Carey was eager to redo lines, improvise, experiment. Scorsese demanded precise words, precise pauses, precise movements. Improvisation was chaos, he later testified. Carey, in return, later mused graciously. Sometimes the greatest gift is a door that remains closed. Scorsese later turned to Leonardo DiCaprio, whose discipline and commitment were tailored to his requirements. The payoff was a monumental performance that solidified their iconic partnership. Carey went on. Their lives never intersected again, not out of hostility, but out of incompatibility. Lastly, Dustin Hoffman. Before Scorsese was a cinematic giant, when he was yet an emerging star in the early 1970s, he longed to cast Hoffman as Taxi Driver. Fresh from The Graduate and Midnight Cowboy, Hoffman was every restless youth and alienated outsider, the quintessential Travis Bickle. But their encounter became notorious. Hoffman would later describe it in amazement. He had no script, and I didn't even know who he was. I thought the guy was crazy. For Scorsese, the rejection was catastrophic. He could see in Hoffman the potential for something revolutionary, but the actor would not go into the darkness. Hoffman opted for security, heading instead to star in All the President's Men and Marathon Man. Scorsese then went with Robert De Niro, who delivered one of cinema's greatest performances with the immortal You Talking to Me? Hoffman eventually confessed regret. I made so many stupid errors in rejecting films. Taxi Driver was one. But Scorsese never glanced over his shoulder. Some actors must be shielded, he would later say. I require actors who will be destroyed and continue on. It wasn't hate, it was compatibility. Scorsese was too wild for Hoffman. Hoffman was too defensive for Scorsese. Their realms could never intersect. These 6 conflicts, Wahlberg, Caan, Roberts, Ryder, Carey, Hoffman, show Scorsese's unrelenting commitment to his dream. To some, that commitment was mythical, propelling them to levels they hadn't envisioned. To others, it was crushing, not to be tolerated. In each instance, the tension forged careers, changed projects, and left behind tales shared in Hollywood corridors. For Scorsese, the reply was always the same: cinema takes everything. Cooperation is allowed.